This week on YCN Vermont Wrap, we'll take a look at some of the top news stories from the past few days from across the state. Then independent gubernatorial candidate Joe Barney will join me live from Montpelier. We'll discuss some of his declared platforms and dig into some of the other hot-button issues that are not addressed on his website. And then on this week's Political Potpourri, I'll share with you my thoughts on when a progressive Democrat shares the sentiments of Happy Independence Day. You're watching YCN Vermont Wrap. Come on, let's go have some fun. Standard, writer Eric Francis penned a column about a group of Woodstock area residents who gathered together to feign anger and incandescent rage over the false narrative that children are literally being ripped, actually torn out of their mother's arms and caged like dogs. You know, that old chestnut. Well, par for the course here in the Democratic People's Republic of Vermont. There really isn't much of a story there, but just a few observations. This was that rally that drew attention because of the 100-year-old attendee, Jane Curtis, who doesn't like Donald Trump because she thinks he's a big fake. And she went on to say, and I quote, "He should have never thought of this policy in the first place." I would imagine that this is probably what's going on in Janie's brain. Crossed wires, lots of them. Newsflash, Janie, it's not his policy. And he didn't think of it. And he didn't write it. It's a policy that was adopted and codified by your patron saint progressive Democrats. The same progressive Democrats that literally ripped a young boy out of his father's arms at the muzzle of a fully automatic HK MP5. Remember Elian Gonzalez? Oh, that's right. That's ancient history. And I'm not supposed to invoke that. Two other noteworthy things about this rally. And I'll call your attention to the photograph of the event. Notice the woman standing with her mouth agape, with the clenched fist raised in the classic socialist pose, holding the sign that reads, "Make America Humane Again." That's Windsor County State Senator Allison Clarkson, a Democrat, like you needed me to tell you that. This virtue-signaling carpetbagger from New York is the same one who, a little over a year ago, received a glowing endorsement from Planned Parenthood of Vermont. Evidently, in the twisted moral landscape of the social justice warrior, it's important to tickle the pleasure centers of the brain by banner waving at a rally inspired by the false narrative that illegal immigrant children are being ripped out of their mother's arms at detention centers. All the while selling your soul in support of an organization that, in actuality, literally rips unborn babies right out of their mother's wombs right here in Vermont for a mere $555. And while we're on the subject of hypocrisy, I gotta ask, what is the deal with this guy? Why would any self-respecting black man stand in solidarity with a group of people that on a daily basis lead a legislative fight on behalf of the very organization that built itself on the racist, eugenicist desires to see the black race abort itself out of existence? Yeah, I said it. It's called Your History. Margaret Sanger. Learn it. Here's a free coupon. And speaking of history, this week the Vermont State Supreme Court heard opening arguments surrounding the South Burlington School Board's decision to replace the school's long-held Rebels mascot. Last year, the school board voted unanimously to drop the Rebels team name because it invokes something that government-run schools don't like to teach: history. That's right, because of the obvious connotations of the Confederacy. You know, in the ultra-white cracker land known as Vermont, the PC police have found one more thing that needs to be eradicated from our society in the endless quest for social justice and equality. A group that stood in opposition to the name change filed a petition to put the issue up for a vote, asking that it be placed on the ballot during a town meeting day. But that proposal was shot down. The school district's attorney, Pietro Lynn, said the school board alone has the power to make the decision surrounding the mascot change decision. Yeah, like, how dare you little people try to get involved in this? What the hell do you know about social justice and equality and stuff? You elected us to make those decisions for you, you petty little minions. And so it goes. The never-ending quest to erase your history brings to mind the words of dystopian author George Orwell, and I quote from his book 1984, Every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statute and street building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. And the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, Joe Barney, a resident of Swanton and an independent candidate for governor, joins me from Montpelier. That and more when YCN Vermont Wrap continues. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. The race for the governor's desk is heating up here in the Green Mountain State, and one man who believes he has what it takes to lead this state in the right direction is Joe Barney, a resident of Swanton and an independent candidate for governor. He joins me live from Montpelier. Joe, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
All right, so Joe, taking a quick look at your website, Barney4gov.com. Four of the positions that you have listed are opioid epidemic, gun control, certainly the environment, and school safety. And for a lot of voters, I think in this race in particular, it boils down to who is the strongest supporter of gun rights in the state of Vermont. So I wanted to get the gun issue. I don't want this to be a gun-centric conversation, but I want to get that out of the way so we can get into some of your other positions. As far as the Second Amendment goes, as far as gun rights, where do you see Vermont going right, and what needs to change?
So Vermont has traditionally had pretty relaxed gun laws, and that's agreeable with me. What's happened recently with S55, I think, is a fault. Vermont hasn't had an issue with gun violence. We don't have a gun crime epidemic. When we go into numbers about gun violence, it usually involves suicides, which are lumped in there, and that's the majority of what happens in Vermont. When we look at actual homicides, a human killing another human, it's pretty rare here. It's one of the lowest crime rates in the nation, in fact. And Vermonters have held a tradition of pretty relaxed gun laws, and we've done okay with it. There's no need to punish the majority for the acts of a few violent few. It's disagreeable with me.
Do you think that Governor Scott violated his oath of office by signing S55 or the package of bills that have collectively and colloquially known as S55 by signing those into law? Did he break his oath to the Constitution?
I would say that it is unconstitutional, and therefore, yes. I would say that he definitely broke his oath.
And if, of course, there's a strong contingent of progressive Democrats in the state of Vermont. If they were to come to you as governor and say, listen, we need another package of Air Fingers, quote, comprehensive common sense gun reform measures, what would your response be to that?
Show me the common sense, because I don't see it.
Okay. I like that response. All right, let's get into the opioid epidemic. Certainly, when the President of the United States travels up to neighboring New Hampshire to address the opioid crisis and refers to the New England states as some of the hardest hit in the country, clearly there's a problem. And I think, too, there's a problem when we see drug traffickers, not dealers, but traffickers, being stopped on Interstate 91 and Interstate 89 with between 1,000 and 3,100 bags of heroin, and they're being kicked loose on personal recognizance bail and notices to appear. Is the state of Vermont being hypocritical by saying, well, they're trying to get the opioid epidemic under control when they're legalizing marijuana and also going very lenient, not again on dealers, but on traffickers, the people that are importing this in large quantities for sale in the Green Mountain State?
Well, if you look at my website, you'll see that one of the methods of counteracting the opioid epidemic is to take a tough line stance on distributors and traffickers. The opioid epidemic is very much a supply and demand industry. And as long as we continue the supply, the demand will always grow because more and more people will become addicted. The way to fight this is to treat both facets, addiction and the supply. So I think it's a fault of government when traffickers are let off with minimal recourse. They're let free. You know what they're going to do is return to their home state and continue to do what they're doing. We really need to take a tough line stance on that. We can't We can't just sit idly by and let that stuff truck its way up Interstate 89, Interstate 91 into our state. I live in Swanton, which is just north of St. Albans, and St. Albans is a really hard-hit town right now. I hear from my friends at Rutland and Bennington counties the same way. It's a statewide issue, and it definitely needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed on both fronts.
So how do you convince the fuzzy pink bunny progressive Democrats in the State House that a hardline approach is actually appropriate? Because they want to usher these people into restorative justice programs and give them breaks on bail. This Pre-Justice Trial Institute has really decimated the state of Vermont. It's in the process of decimating the state of New Hampshire by lobbying for the virtual elimination of bail systems and the tough type of sanctions on criminals that really seek to disincentivize future occurrences of that criminal behavior. How do we get the message through to the legislatures in Montpelier that they need to get tough and that getting tough is the proper approach in this case?
It's hard to make them really see the problem at its root. So for myself, I watched a close family member struggle with addiction. So it's hit pretty close to home, and I've had many long talks with him about how it all played out. And the availability was a huge part of it. As long as drugs continue to funnel into Vermont, we're always going to have a problem. So we really have to disincentivize trafficking in Vermont. Like you said, we've really got to take a hardline approach on that. Now, it can be hard to convince a progressive Democrat that a hardline approach is the correct response, but I believe wholeheartedly that it is in this situation. If someone gets in a car in New York with the intention of selling drugs to Vermonters and they understand that there is a large sentence awaiting them if they're caught, they might not. When the risk outweighs the reward, eventually that person will stop risking it.
I've said many times before that the number one export from the state of Vermont is not lumber, it's not paper, it's not maple syrup, but it's people. People are fleeing the state in record numbers. What do you see as the cure or the solution to solving the people hemorrhaging problem that the state of Vermont is encountering right now?
So the people hemorrhaging problem of Vermont is a huge, multifaceted issue. It comes down to business viability at its probably its most root cause. Without new businesses and new jobs, well-educated Vermonters, which is also one of our number one expenditures, education, well-educated Vermonters just leave. So they've gone through our public school system. They've utilized funds for public school, and then they leave. So that's negative impact on Vermont on two facets. You're losing future revenues, and you've lost all the previous revenues of educating that individual. It is crucial that we keep young Vermonters in Vermont. I myself am a 24-year-old, and I chose to stay here because I saw potential. What we have to do is keep that potential going. Businesses in Vermont are hit with sanctions left and right that are unfair and unwarranted. We have a lot of environmental laws that serve to prohibit new construction when it comes to new businesses. And it's a multifaceted issue. It's on a lot of fronts. We could really do a lot better here in Vermont, and we owe it to ourselves and to our kids to do better.
Joe, we're going to have to take a break here in about 60 seconds. So real quick, before we head out to the commercial break, talking about education, Act 46, a lot of people lamenting that. It's a monstrosity. It's a cash black hole. What would you do as governor to fix that problem?
The education system as a whole really needs to be looked into for a couple different reasons. It has been my observation that you do end up with a lot of administrators and not many teachers. So I think Act 46, when it was first proposed, may have been in good conscience, but what it's turned into has been it's been a nightmare for educators. It's been a nightmare for school districts. It really needs to be rethought. I think continuing to attach amendments and to change things here and there, it just doesn't work. It's going to have to be scrapped and something else, another approach taken. Forcing school districts that have been their own districts for decades all of a sudden to latch on to a larger district just isn't appropriate. It's not going to serve the students well, and it doesn't serve Vermonters well.
All right, Joe, what I want to do is I want to do three questions here, just kind of rapid fire, round robin type scenario. Number one, you're running as an independent, not as a Republican, not as a Democrat. Why independent?
I don't agree with the two-party system. It locks a politician into a lot of set of beliefs that they may not agree with, and I think the huge funding that comes from either party serves well for corruption.
What does it mean to you to be a conservative, and are you a conservative?
Yes, I would identify more on the conservative side of the spectrum. Being a conservative means holding morals and values in a very high regard and upholding the Constitution of the United States of America.
And last question, what does integrity mean to you?
Integrity? Integrity is what you do when no one else is looking. It means that even when you think there may not be a repercussion for an action, you don't take said action.
Joe Barney, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day today to be a part of YCN Vermont Wrap. Just for future knowledge, would you be willing to come back on the program and debate any of the other gubernatorial candidates?
Yeah, anytime.
The website is Barney4gov.com. Again, Barney4gov.com. Joe Barney, thank you so much again for being a part of the program. Have a great weekend and happy 4th of July.
You as well. Have a good day.
We're going to take a quick break, and when YCN Vermont Wrap returns, it's political potpourri time. On this week's edition, I'll give you my take on the Independence Day sentiments of progressive Democrats. We'll be right back. This coming Wednesday is July 4th, America's birthday, Independence Day. And from sea to shining sea, many Americans will enjoy a day off from work. They'll go to parades, attend cookouts, chow down burgers and dogs, crack open frosty cold beverages, head out to fireworks displays, or maybe even blow some off in their own backyards. Ain't America great? Now, some will take a moment to reflect on exactly what the importance of July 4th is about. Others will go about the traditional activities associated with the day and give nary a thought to the significance of the holiday and exactly how the events that transpired on that day 242 years ago have impacted their daily lives. Ever since Barack Obama became president, I must admit that I've developed a guilty pleasure. Every July 4th, I eagerly scan social media sources to see exactly how many progressive Democrats have flocked to their favorite platforms to express obligatory Independence Day sentiments. And every year, as the Democratic Party moves ever more steadily to the left, I find myself reveling in the hypocritical irony of those expressed sentiments. So I'm going to title this week's Progressive Potpourri segment as follows: Democratic Progressives Celebrating Independence Day? I call bull. Now, for those of you that follow both this television program and my two daily radio programs, you know that I'm just as heavily entrenched in New Hampshire politics as I am of those here in Vermont. That being said, I have to give the New Hampshire Democratic Party credit. Last year, they decided to forego the Independence Day, Happy Birthday America sentiments entirely. Not a single mention. Nothing. Zip, zero, zilch. Now, this may come as a surprise to you, but I've really grown to despise the Democratic Party and everything that their party represents. But being the eternal pragmatist that I am, I have to give them credit. Understand that I respect the fact that they've had the decency to not hide behind the masquerade of seemingly compulsory sentiments and skip the pleasantries entirely. And as the song by Alison Krauss in Union Station goes, you say it best when you say nothing at all. The policies and the goals of the modern Democratic Party make their contempt for this nation crystal clear. And I, for one, don't need their sentiments of fake patriotism. Reflecting on the events from last 4th of July, I'd have to say the biggest surprise came when Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders was among the first to tweet out his July 4th wishes. Quote, "Wishing a safe and happy Independence Day to all," he tweeted. And most likely it wasn't him, but one of his staffers. Either way, his sentiments make me want to vomit. Keep in mind that this is coming from a man, and I use that word very loosely in the context of describing old Bern, who has done absolutely nothing with his life except suckle at the teat of government under the auspices of being a servant of the people. Bernie Sanders wants anything but independence for you little people. You know, the ones that he and other progressives routinely manipulate and use for their own benefit and outright enrichment. The notion of independence and the ideals upon which our founding fathers established this nation are utterly detestable to the ruling class of today's Democratic Party and those in the progressive movement. And I would submit to you that there isn't a single ideal Democrats advocate for that empower the individual to rise above the collective. The individual exists, at least in the mind of a progressive, solely for the benefit of that collective. Collectivism is a foundational principle of progressivism. A person's value, as perceived by the Progressive Democrat, lies solely in their ability to produce for that collective and to exist only as a spoke in that collective wheel. In the eyes of today's Progressive Democrat, all in all, you are just another brick in the wall. As a principled American conservative, I choose to see my role and the role of my fellow Americans not through the lens of those Pink Floyd lyrics. I choose to recognize that what makes all of us unique individuals is the very thing that makes the concepts of socialism, Marxism, and communism nothing more than unattainable garbage science fiction. And that thing, that notion, is self-actualization. Nobody wants to be just another brick in the wall. But Progressive Democrats don't want people aspiring for greatness. Aspirations cause problems. It causes people to think outside of that proverbial box, to question how they can become better, how they can achieve more. Progressive Democrats advocate for systems of governance that tamp down and smother the human spirit, not encourage it to soar free and to heights previously thought unattainable. It suppresses the very spirit of man, creating a miserable, bleak, and desolate existence. Progressive Democrats despise free speech. That is, unless it's speech that they agree with and that furthers their agenda. The attacks by the Progressive Democrats on conservative and right-leaning print media, conservative blogs, conservative television, talk radio, evidence this beyond a shadow of a doubt. Progressive Democrats despise another key component of independence and individualism, and that's religion. The freedom to worship how and even what one sees fit. The guarantees of religious freedom established by the Constitution of the United States have been grossly misinterpreted over the past 100 years. The words contained in the First Amendment, quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof," have been maligned and intentionally misinterpreted by activist progressive judges to serve as justification for the purging of God from our society, in furtherance of their attempts at establishing their perfect secular nation. Now, I've got to let you in on a little secret, and this may come as a total shock to many of you, and not just to Progressive Democrats. The First Amendment, among other things, establishes freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. Progressive Democrats also despise Americans who love their nation and the ideals that built this country. Hardworking, middle-class, blue-collar Americans from the Bible Belt and flyover country are ridiculed and invalidated. They're all deeply hated because they're the ones that stand in the way of the progressive quest for that unattainable utopian society. Their idea of the perfect society is one which is built upon a pacified and obedient worker class by their academics and their central planners. The elimination of people and societal aspects which are deemed undesirable by progressives is a necessary undertaking in the quest for that perfected society, wherein human nature has been controlled and perfected, and where equality for all exists. The only thing standing in the way of that perfect society is you. You pesky, interloping, independence-minded, flag-waving, patriotic, beer-swilling troglodyte. You stand in the way between them and their progress, and you need to be eliminated. As an American, and a damn proud American at that, I thank God that I have the opportunity to spend 20 hours a week on the radio airwaves and 1 hour per week on television channels in both Vermont and New Hampshire. During that time, I extol the virtues of limited government, personal responsibility, free market capitalism, freedom of religion, and good old-fashioned patriotism. To all true Americans who understand and value freedom, liberty, and independence, I wish you a happy 4th of July and a happy Independence Day. And to the progressive Democrats in this state, I'll simply say this. You can keep your pleasantries. Quite frankly, I don't care to read or hear your hollow sentiments. I'll share with you sentiments that are not hollow. I will keep both my freedom and my country, and I'll fight for and defend both until my dying day. In the mailbag this week from the past week, Mike in Jericho writes, Keith, your show on Channel 40 WYCI is the highlight of my week. You are awesome. Thanks for keeping it real. Mike, certainly do appreciate those sentiments. Kip in Randolph says, quote, Keith, I watched your rap for the first time this morning, and I was totally surprised. So good to know I'm not alone in my thoughts and beliefs. Kip, thank you, and remember one thing. We're all in this together, and there are many more of us out there than what our opposition would like to think. Marilyn in St. Johnsbury writes, quote, you're a disgusting human being, and I even hesitate to call you human. You represent what is wrong with this state. Marilyn, thank you for your email. It must have been absolutely exhausting for you to type all of that out. But let me correct you on one tiny little detail. I'm not what's wrong. I'm right. There's a reason why people like me are called the right. Tony from Barrie said, quote, just caught your show. I love it. Really enjoyed your opening dialogue. What a breath of fresh air. Good job, man. Tony, thank you for those sentiments, and thanks for raising the ratio of positive letters to negative letters up to 19-1. Sorry, Marilyn. Looks like, again, you lose. That's going to do it for this week's edition of YCN Vermont Wrap. I'd like to thank independent candidate for Vermont Governor Joe Barney for joining me on the program this week. And as always, be sure to share with me your thoughts about this week's program. Please make a note of the new email. It's khanson@ycnnow.com. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. Be sure to let me know the city or town that you live in as well. And be sure to follow me on Twitter @RealKeithHanson. That's @RealKeithHanson on Twitter. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Have a safe and pleasant holiday week.